because the Western narrative is fake, just like their narrative on Palestine is fake, and their concern about human rights is fake. And now the United States wants to attack Iran and kill people because it wants to support the people of Iran, just like it sanctions Iran to support the people of Iran. And Western media pretends that, yeah, that's what it's all about. The reality is the only reason why they hate Iran is because Iran supports the people of Palestine. That's it. If Iran was like Turkey or the Emirates or Saudi Arabia or Jordan or Egypt, Iran wouldn't be a regime. It wouldn't be evil. It would be one of their friends. And it's been evil to the United States and the West for decades, for this very, very reason. It's independence, and its opposition to Western empire and hegemony, and its opposition to ethno-supremacism and ethnic cleansing and genocide in Palestine and mass murder that's been going on for decades.
Whenever some Western politicians, pundits, media claim they want to liberate people of another country, we need to be skeptical, because based on track records, the lives of people actually living in those countries have never gotten better after Western interventions. We can ask Iraqis, Afghans, Libyans, the Philippines, Native Americans. Well, the list of countries that the US screwed over can go on and on. The current US President Donald Trump urged Iranians to keep protesting and said help is on the way on his platform Truth Social. The former CIA director Mike Pompeo admitted that Mossad agents are on the streets in Iran. The Mossad spokesperson also admitted they are in the field with protesters in Iran. These are blatant foreign interventions and color revolution tactics that we have seen being repeated in many countries before. As long as a country that has a strategically important location and sufficient natural resources and seek independence refuse to be obedient to the empire, we will see some Western forces intervene in those countries in the name of liberation, democracy, and freedom. Ironically though, when Trump urged Iranians to keep protesting, even use violence against their government, domestically, ICE, the Immigration and Custom Enforcement, was using cruel violence towards US citizens. For example, on January the 7th, the ICE shot and murdered a 37-year-old female US citizen. And the Trump administration is using all efforts to defame this person to justify this fatal shooting. And not to mention, there are many working class people in the United States have been thrown into poverty by the system. So we need to ask why these Western countries keep saying they want to liberate people of another country when they even refuse to liberate people in their own countries. We need to understand what really happened in Iran, and we need to listen to voices beyond Western mainstream media talking points. So today I invited a guest from Iran. His name is Seyed Mohammad Marandi. He's a professor at the University of Tehran. Thanks for joining us, Professor.
Thank you very much for having me.
So the first question, I hope you can give our viewers to tell what's really happened, because these protests and tensions have been going on for many days, and some media reports that these peaceful protesters are not satisfied with the current Iranian government and demand freedom. But we also see there are a lot of people protesting and supporting the current Iranian government, and they are also protesting against this US and Israel intervention. As someone in Tehran, can you tell us what it is like on the ground, what really happened?
Well, right now, it is very quiet, and we haven't had any unrest for 3 days, maybe. Ever since Saturday, on Saturday we had a very less unrest, and then on no one died as far as I recall. And then Sunday, nothing. Monday. So since it's all been quiet, people drive around. You can hear the traffic right now. It's 8:45. It's still rush hour. People going home. They go out. They go till midnight. It's very peaceful. There's no internet or very little internet. We can only get Iranian sites right now. Iranian apps work for the most part, not all of them yet, but they're increasingly doing so. I can only speak with you now because I'm at a studio, as you can see. I'm not at home. When I'm at home, I can't communicate with you, but they allowed me to come here to do some interviews. The reality is that we had currency manipulation by the United States uh, because it's waging economic war against Iranians, for it's been doing so for decades. And the West has been doing them. They've been trying to harm ordinary Iranians as much as they can for the last few decades. In fact, Trump, who just imposed new tariffs against countries who do trade with Iran, he's doing it to harm ordinary Iranians because when you impose sanctions and tariffs, it's not going to hurt. The intention is not to attack a particular person; it's to attack the whole of society, to create joblessness, create poverty, to make people miserable, to make people desperate, to tear up to destroy the social fabric, and to make people so desperate that they rise up and over. That's what the objective. So it's very sinister, and the West pretends as if they are supporting human rights. They're the enemies of human rights, whether in Iran, whether in Yemen, whether in Venezuela, whether in Cuba, whether in Syria, which until Al Qaeda came to power was sanctioned. So they've been waging war on the Iranian people for decades. When they speak about human rights, and no one takes it seriously here. So when they manipulate, and people believe that. So when let me put it this way: when they brought down the currency by 40%, there were some protests in Tehran and I think a couple of other cities. I don't remember right now, but mainly Tehran, maybe Mashhad, but I'm not sure. And a few thousand people. And they were basically business people who were protesting to the central bank, saying you have to stabilize the currency because it gets us into trouble. They sell goods and then suddenly the price goes up and they can't buy new goods and it could lead to bankruptcy. So it's a very legitimate fear and concern. There was no violence. No one was arrested. No policeman came and battered people and arrested people. Unlike in England, when an old Jewish 80-year-old lady says, I'm against genocide, they send her to jail. Or in Germany, if a young woman's wearing a keffiyeh in solidarity with the Palestinians, she's beaten up and taken to jail. None of that happened. No deaths, no arrests, no beatings. Then after a couple of days, we saw infiltration of these very violent young groups of people who were they began attacking public services, public buildings, and but still there weren't any deaths. And there was some violence with guns in one of the provinces, or one or two, but the real fighting began on Thursday night. And then you had all these different small groups in different cities and in different parts of the big cities come to the streets and carry out huge acts of violence. Today, we had the funeral for 100 people who were martyred. Policemen and volunteers, the Basij, riot guards, and the Revolutionary Guards. 100 people in Tehran. Roughly 100 policemen, from my understanding, I may get the numbers wrong, but roughly 100 officers of the law were murdered. And in all, between 300 and 400, I think, in general, they say it's closer to 300, volunteers and guards and riot police, along with ordinary policemen, were murdered in the last few days. And then the West insists that these are peaceful protests. No, the peaceful protests were the first couple of days, and then the riots took over. And the rioters and the terrorists who had guns and they were shooting people and killing people. They burnt 2 people alive in a mosque. They trapped them and kept throwing Molotov cocktails till they burned to death. They went and destroyed a clinic, a big clinic, and a young woman nurse was inside. She burned to death. She went to the top floor, but the fire kept going up. This is not what you'll hear in the Western media. They destroyed tens of public buses, tens of fire engines, many ambulances. It's all the footage is online, but the West pretends that this doesn't exist. As you said, the former head of the CIA, Pompeo, said that Mossad's on the ground. As you said, the Mossad itself said that they're on the ground. And just yesterday, I think Channel 414 of Israel said that the foreign governments are giving arms, meaning the Israelis and the Americans. Yet these pundits in the West close their eyes. The Israelis themselves are admitting it. The Zionists themselves are admitting it, but Western pundits and media pretend as if nothing's happening. Why? Because they want to stick to this fake narrative that the Iranians are just gunning down peaceful protesters. And they give these fake numbers and they say unnamed sources in Iran as if Iranian officials are going to give information to Reuters or the New York Times. They just make it up. But and then on Monday, we had people got very angry that these rioters who were killing people and who were destroying so much public property across the country and who were receiving support, open support from the West, this made people angry. So on Monday, they went to the streets. In Tehran, over 2 million people participated, 2.3 to 3 million people, depending on different estimates. People can look it up. They can see their satellite images. In all the cities, they had these big protests. And wherever there were riots, the protests there were bigger against the rioters. In Mashhad, 800,000 people. So where you had riots, you had a harsher reaction. And Tehran, for 2.3 million people, I mean, or 3 million, whatever, people to go in a place, it takes half a day. Because for me, let's say I went, it took me just 2 hours to get there, 3 hours to get back, and a couple of hours, the whole day is gone. And imagine many of the people who participated are just like factory workers or people of, who struggle already. And then they make the sacrifice to go there to make a political statement. And then I was on, what's that guy's name? Piers Morgan's show yesterday, and he was saying, oh, this is fake and AI. The whole thing was shown live. I mean, I think you probably have seen some of it, but it was the whole thing on Press TV, on other media outlets, and on Iranian media. It was shown, what do you call it in English? It was a rolling coverage throughout the day. And then there was helicopter footage, which was very impressive. And then the Americans and Musk were saying this is AI. Whereas the footage of 4 or 5 years ago, if you put it alongside this, and some smart young people did that, it's different. But they don't want the truth because the reality doesn't coincide with their narrative. Just like with China, just like with Russia, just like where whoever is opposed to the United States and the West has. So it doesn't matter if it's Trump or it's AOC. They both say we have to help Iran. If you want to help Iran, remove the sanctions, stop strangling children. They did nothing about Gaza. They were supporting, both AOC voted for the Iron Dome, and Trump, of course, supported the Netanyahu regime. So, these people don't care about children and human rights and human dignity. It's all a show. So basically, that's it. They've angered ordinary Iranians and they've united Iranians to stand up against the riots. And right now, things are quiet. But the West continues to say thousands of Iranians are dying. And every few hours, they just, increase the numbers like a balloon. They just inflate them. And, and there's no accountability in the West. If they say 50,000 people, who's going to counter their claims? So and then Piers Morgan yesterday was telling me, well, we cannot, and his producers were saying, well, we cannot verify the Iranian footage. But then the New York Times can make all these articles that people in Iran told us this, or we have these numbers. How come you can verify all those numbers, but you can't verify TV footage that's being broadcast live? The hypocrisy and the dishonesty is, and if people say, how can the reality be so different from the narrative in the West? If anyone says that, then I don't know, maybe they've been living in a coma throughout this Gaza Holocaust.
You said there were a lot of violence that the rioters committed to like the police for law enforcement. Like the Western media say this is a peaceful protesters. The peaceful protesters simply want
That's
democracy and freedom. Um, but like, but we don't see those kind of footage on this media. Um, and that kind of remind me of what happened in Hong Kong in China in 2019 when they keep saying those rioters as peaceful protesters who want democracy, but actually these people are burning things, burning buildings, destroying buildings, throwing bombs into buildings, and actually killed elderly citizens who just telling them like stop destroying the city, and they kill this old janitor. And the Western media also described the Hong Kong policeman as the violent one, but actually police in Hong Kong never fired a bullet. So yeah, I do see the similarities between the tactics, like the writers trying to make the people of law enforcement to use violence against them. So it became a perfect story for some web media. I don't know whether you feel the same about situation in Iran.
Yes, it's the same, but the difference is that because our neighboring countries have been destroyed by the West, Iraq destroyed, as you pointed out in your introduction, and it's still, it's still not normal. Afghanistan destroyed, decades of dirty war, beginning with the dirty war, with the Soviet Union, supporting extremists in Afghanistan to fight to encourage the Soviet Union to invade, and then destroying Afghanistan in the process in order to create a Vietnam for the Soviet Union. And then Pakistan, as you know, has many internal problems. So they are able to bring in weapons from these countries, from northern Iraq, from Pakistan, and from Afghanistan. And thus, these rioters, they have weapons. And they use these weapons. I mean, 300 officers in the United States, just a few days ago, a young woman shot in the face. And the argument is, was she turning to the right enough to justify him shooting her in the face? And then there's this huge debate, and then ICE officers beating people and all that in the protest. Here, they murdered 100 policemen and 300 more, maybe up to 400, not again, I'm not sure, of a combined force of volunteers and guards and riot guards and policemen. That's war. And they were using guns, all sorts of different guns. And a lot of ordinary people were shot by these people. And as I said, they beheaded people. They smashed people's faces. A lot of these policemen, their faces are destroyed. They're destroyed. You look at them, I've seen pictures. You can't, you want to look away. But the West pretends that these are peaceful. And it's really an insult to the Iranian people, because on Monday we had so many millions of people, probably in all 20 million people. And remember, not everyone can go. People work in hospitals. It was actually a working day. It was not a weekend. So all these people went there. So are they trying to say that all these people who were supporting the Constitution and the state and the leader and all that, who went to the streets, they believe the Western narrative on Iran and they still go to the streets? No, it's because the Western narrative is fake, just like their narrative on Palestine is fake, and their concern about human rights is fake. And now the United States wants to attack Iran and kill people because it wants to support the people of Iran, just like it sanctions Iran to support the people of Iran. And Western media pretends that, yeah, that's what it's all about. The reality is the only reason why they hate Iran is because Iran supports the people of Palestine. That's it. If Iran was like Turkey or the Emirates or Saudi Arabia or Jordan or Egypt, Iran wouldn't be a regime. It wouldn't be evil. It would be one of their friends. But since Iran supports the Palestinian people and it actively opposes the genocide, Iran is evil. And it's been evil evil to the United States and the West for decades, for this very, very reason. It's independence and its opposition to Western empire and hegemony, and its opposition to ethno-supremacism and ethnic cleansing and genocide in Palestine and mass murder that's been going on for decades.
Mm. You already mentioned a little how the sanctions affected the country. I mean, Trump says he wants to help Iranians, but the sanctions that the US that put on Iran was the exact reason that crippled the economy and fueled this unrest. People are discontent with the economy or inflation, yeah, because of sanctions. So I mean, it's just like you mentioned, if you really want to help Iranian people, leave the sanctions. So their economy will like it'll be much easier for them to make their ends meet. So and also I just want to bring I was reading, is it behind me? Because the other day I was reading a book. I was reading the book. It's called The Art of Sanctions, written by senior officials in the United States, and the book was trying to teach those in the United States who want to pursue a career as diplomats or policy designers.
Yes.
So the whole book used several examples, and the main example is how the U.S. failed on sanctioning Iraq, and then what they learned from the failure in Iraq, and then how they readjusted and successfully used it on Iran. When you read such a book from policymakers in the United States, you know the whole point of making sanctions is to make the people, ordinary people in a country suffer, make the people in the country suffer so they will rise up and overthrow their own governments. But yeah, what can you tell us how these sanctions affected Iran? Because Iran probably is the most sanctioned countries and under U.S. sanctions for decades. So what kind of impact it had on Iranian people?
The interesting thing, as you rightly pointed out, the book is titled The Art of Sanctions. In other words, it's an art to make people die. It's an art to make people suffer. That's how the Western regimes think about the rest of humanity. Remember, I'm Iranian. Saddam Hussein in the 1980s used chemical weapons against us. Who gave him chemical weapons? It was the Germans, the very same German regime that today is preaching about human rights, but at the same time is supporting the Israelis in their genocide in Gaza. So the hypocrisy is unbelievable. The name of the book is so utterly disgusting. I know the author, I've met him, but I ignored him at the conference because these are monsters. What they do is they try to make people suffer. So, for example, certain medicines, so let's say, God forbid, you have someone in your family or a relative who has a serious disease, and you buy medicine, and then suddenly the medicine isn't there. And they can't get it because they can't import it, because it's difficult to import. So you've spent a lot of money, let's say, for cancer medicine, and you've gone halfway, and then there's no medicine. So you've made your relative suffer this medicine. You've sold your car to buy the medicine, and then you can't complete the process because the Europeans and the Americans have blocked your access to medicine. Or they try to prevent, in that book, I think one of the examples is about chicken, and he was able to make chicken inaccessible to people with low salaries. And he says it with pride. This is as evil as it gets. It is just like waging a hot war. But these, the United States and the Europeans, they're genocidal regimes. We've seen them, what they've done to the Gaza, to the people of Palestine in Gaza. So what else do you expect? They've been making Cubans suffer for so many decades. What threat is Cuba to the United States? But they want to crush the country because they have to get their way. This is the reality of how the West treats the rest of the world. And there's no denying it. And the rest of the world is waking up, especially after Gaza. The rest of the world is seeing reality. And when they speak about human rights and human dignity and human honor and democracy, it's all fake. And we see it their own societies moving in actually the opposite direction, arresting people for supporting Palestine, kicking people out. We're seeing what ICE is doing in the United States. So people are not buying it anymore. People are less naive, and the empire is more crude than before. Trump is much more crude than his predecessors. He goes out and says, the oil is mine, the oil is ours. And people across the world look upon the United States with great disgust. So the empire, in my opinion, is slipping away. But as it slips away, it's becoming more aggressive and crude and violent and vicious openly. But that doesn't mean that before it wasn't. I mean, Obama was the guy who droned people all the time. He destroyed Libya. He initiated the dirty war in Syria using ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda. He was the one who green-lighted the genocidal war against Yemen by Saudi Arabia and the Emirates. So, and Biden, of course, with Netanyahu, they pursued the genocide in Gaza. I mean, the US, and then, of course, there's George Bush and Iraq and all that. So it's not as if Trump is any different from the previous presidents, but he's more crude. And I think when you put all of these together, it indicates that the United States is rapidly declining. But as it declines, it's becoming more vicious. The regime, I don't mean ordinary people.
Yeah. As we saw in the past few days, the ordinary Americans were also suffering from this brutal regime, I would say. You see videos of normal US citizens being dragged out of their workplaces, their homes, their cars. The eyes have their knees on their head, on their necks, and the woman. This time, the woman was not even an immigrant, a white U.S. citizen who was doing like posed no harm to the ICE officers, and he got shot dead. So yeah, and also I met a lot of ordinary Americans who also hate the system so much because they've been trapped in debts, college debt, healthcare debt. So yeah, like the day empire is hurting everyone, their own citizens, but also destroying the entire world. But
Yes,
at the
no
same
one is giving weapons to the Americans. No one is like the Americans and the Israelis are giving weapons for people to kill police officers in Iran. But was happening in the United States is spontaneous. It's ordinary people. If there's no foreign influence, but still we see how angry people are. And by the way, the reason why they disconnected the internet was because these rioting groups were all being coordinated. So they shut down the internet and the whole thing fell apart. Why? Because they were being controlled from abroad. If these were all spontaneous, then the riots should continue. But they've collapsed 24 hours after they shut the internet. Now, of course, they continue to shut the internet because there's a strong possibility that the Americans will attack. And we know that the Americans gather intelligence through electronic devices and so on. So the Iranians want to keep the Americans in the dark as much as possible. But we'll see in the coming days, they are gradually opening up to internal sites, and then later on, things will change. Of course, there may be a war facing us in the coming days or a major attack. And that, of course, is something that Western media supports because it's all one party. It's all the single party. The same people who gassed me in the 1980s, they want to bomb me today for the sake of the Iranian people.
yeah. At the same time, we do see a lot of Iranian people in the United States, in Canada, in other countries who are also condemning or criticizing the current Iranian government, and saying they want to overthrow the government and saying all horrible things about Iran. But and we always see such, I would say, diasporas from every other countries who fled to other countries and support Western interventions and Western military operations into their own ancestral homelands. Even like after Maduro was kidnapped, we saw some Venezuelans living in Miami, celebrating the US military interventions, but the Venezuelans in Venezuela are definitely not happy with this. So, can you tell us who are these Iranian diasporas? Who are these Iranian diasporas that are supporting US interventions?
Well, most Iranians in the diaspora, they're not even political. They're just living their lives. Many of them were just immigrants or they went there for work. They have family and they're living. Those who are politically active against Iran, it's to their benefit. You have a huge host of Persian language media funded by Western governments and intelligence agencies that hire many thousands of people. They have websites, they have TV, they have Telegram channels, and then they're funding armies of people, online activists. You get money. Western taxpayers are spending billions of dollars a year on these people. So some people are in it for the money. Others are the people like the monarchists who were stealing the money for decades, and then they were kicked out. They were kicked out of the country, or they left the country. They're angry. Of course, they're angry. And of course, in the West, the media also influences people. When you hear bad, I mean, many of these Iranians, they haven't been to Iran for many years. They know not very little about Iran. They hear about Iran from CNN and Fox News, they're all the same. I mean, one is more bombastic and the other one is maybe a bit more sophisticated. But in reality, as I said, AOC says we have to support the Iranian people. Trump says we have to support the Iranian people. It's a uniparty. So there are also many who are influenced by propaganda. But, I've been abroad. I've been to Iranian restaurants. Some people know me. I've never had any difficulty. Some are influenced by propaganda, obviously, and some have a vested interest. But at the end of the day, the influence of what the West is declining, and their soft power, especially after Gaza, is collapsing. So, and that, of course, and that's why they're dangerous, and that's why we may have a war in the coming days. But the United States is not going to get its way, and it's not going to defeat Iran. And it's going to end very badly for the world if the United States attacks Iran. But ultimately, regardless of what happens in the days ahead, I'm optimistic about the future because the post-American empire world will create better opportunities, hopefully, for people across the global majority, and hopefully for many people in the West as well.
Mm. My last question is, you already mentioned a little why the US hates Iran so much. But like seems now it's even more desperate. Like they can't wait for one more day to destroy Iran. So why they are so desperate, so anxious, and what's their strategic goal in this region and why they want to destroy Iran?
Well, Iran, in accordance with its constitution and the ideology that's dominant here, supports the oppressed. It's in the constitution. That's why when the West was supporting apartheid South Africa, Iran was supporting the resistance in Southern Africa, Nelson Mandela, the ANC, and other resistance groups. When Iran was supporting Maduro, Iran was supporting Cuba, Iran was supporting Nicaragua, and all countries in Central and Latin America which were under American pressure because they are oppressed by the United States. And the same is true as in Bosnia, in Syria during the Dirty War. And of course, the United States hates an independent Iran, especially since Iran 50 years ago was a proxy of the United States, just like other countries in this region. That's one reason. But I think another big reason is Palestine. The Iranians support the Palestinian people. The Iranians are against ethnic cleansing. The Iranians are against ethno-supremacism. They're against genocide. And Iran actively supports the Palestinian people. It's the only country that does that alongside Yemen and groups that are allied to Iran. No one else does it. All the other countries do business, or they have business relations, trade relations, political relations. So this angers the United States greatly, especially at a time when things are not looking good for the Israeli regime. The world dislikes the regime after the genocide. It hates the regime. And that is the biggest defeat during the last 2 years and 3 months, more than 3 months now. The biggest defeat is that it has become illegitimate in the eyes of the global majority, and that angers the West, and they would like to punish Iran for this. And they are more than happy to kill Iranians, as they did during the riots, bringing in terrorists, as they do through the maximum pressure sanctions to kill people, ordinary people, and as they did during the 12-day war, as Iran was negotiating, they were plotting against the country, and as they're probably going, or quite possibly going to do again in the coming days. But the Iranian people are resilient. We saw how they came to the streets on Monday in defiance of the West, and hopefully this will end well without many people dying. But the West kills. They like killing. They murder a lot. They do it for, they're the best at it. But I am optimistic about the future.
Thank you so much, Professor. I do hope things get well very soon. Stay safe in Iran, and thank you so much for sharing your perspective. It's very important for us to see the whole picture. So I always welcome you back to this channel. See you next time.
You too. Thank you. Bye for now.